So I'm gonna start this off by talking about how okay I am with people hobbying as part of their hobby, if that makes any sense. Basically, what I mean by that is that, especially with the last Space Marine Codex, I was totally cool with people doing creative things to enhance their experience, play a competitive army while still playing a fluffy army, and have fun with it, so on and so forth. For example, in the last book, you could take Volcanistan and Captain Lysander at the same time, and no matter who you were playing, no matter what chapter you were playing, you could use these guys, and together you could choose which one was more advantageous for you at the time. And that's how the book was supposed to be, and I understand that. Now, since then, a lot of tournaments all over the country have started letting you use more special characters. Because at the time, it was very rare to allow that. There were characters like Eldrad, who was really, really good, Typhus, Mephiston at the time at least. So they were a little, they wouldn't want you to do it as much. But now you can because of Space Marines 5th edition, thanks to Matt Ward. He allows you to take characters now. Um, and I've seen a million things. I was playing Iron Warriors. I wasn't really playing them, but I was working on them. And I was doing things like giving them bionics and marking them Zinch. Doing things like, giving them cool metal armor and marking them Nurgle, so on and so forth. The ability to take a rule and then use it as something else. As long as you tell your opponent about it, that's okay. Now, in a competitive scene, that's all good and well, because you're pretty much going to be playing a person once. They have to have a written army list that's written ahead of time and given to judges, so on and so forth. So you don't really have to worry about that. But in a circle of friends, it becomes a bigger deal, in my eyes. Because, again, when the Space Marines look however they want, if you take Lysander and Heston, like I was saying, and you want to paint them like Ultramarines, it's said in the book, hey, do that. And those are the only two guys that are going to be changing. So as long as your opponent knows who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what color they're painted, if they're like, oh, that big guy with a Thunderhammer is Lysander, that guy over there is Heston, which one are you using? That one? Awesome. And it's done. Conversation over. But then, when you run into things like, the biggest one I see are Chaos Space Marines, but also Tyranids, which I have a quick little story about in a second. But things like Chaos Space Marines, especially when people don't paint them, or if they paint them very generically, or if they paint them however they want and just use them however they want. Normally, I wouldn't have a huge problem with that, but when it stretches out to you looking across the table at your opponent and being like, man, I could really use some Nurgle dudes right now. Good thing the marks are competitively priced, so it wouldn't be too easy for me to switch over. Oh, hey, I could use a little bit of speed because I can see that your army's not great at close combat. I'm going to be marked Slaanesh, so on and so forth. And that changed even more with the new Chaos book, now that they have those cool banners. I don't know how many people I hear talking about writing squads into their armies at like the maximum number of points that they can be for having a mark and a banner, just so they can easily switch them out to be something else. Now, I don't think that's a cool thing to do. Especially if you play a lot with the same people. Proxying I'm okay with. Learning how to use a new unit or something, that's fine. But when it becomes a big deal, because you do it all the time just to get yourself an advantage, I think that goes against not only the theme of the game, but it's just bad sportsmanship, You are basically counterpicking for your opponent, which would be an entire different video on tailoring your list, which I might do sometime. So that being said, with reading the new Space Marine Codex, the first thing I thought, and this was even in the early rumor stage, but when we finally got our hands on the Codex, the first thing I was thinking was like, oh, hey, it says specifically You don't have to buy a character. You don't have to pay points for it. Play any legion or chapter you want. Pick one, it's yours, it's done. But then you can only pick those special characters. Now that, I mean, aside from the fact that now I have a Lysander model I can't really use, I had a Calgar model I was working on, a Tigurius model, so on and so forth, which I could hypothetically use, because it doesn't say really that you have to be painted the right way, but it does kind of say, hey, if you're playing an Ultramarines army, or if you're playing an Ultramarine successor, use Ultramarines rules. It doesn't say, hey, are you playing Raven Guard and really want Tigurius? Well, just use Ultramarines, you know. Which normally, like I started the video, I wouldn't have a huge problem with, because that's part of the game. Hobbying, playing the army you want. You don't have to paint things the way they're supposed to be, and that I understand. But then, 2 seconds later, when you decide, you know what, it might be advantageous for me to have all my bolters be fake preferred enemy, I should take Lysander, or Cantor, or so on and so forth. And more so to add on to that, not taking any special characters at all, and just picking and choosing chapter tactics based on what your opponent is taking, which is really, really easy to do because it's free, and apparently you don't need to have your models painted that way. So you can just do whatever you want, basically. You know, do you have a good amount of melty guns and flamers? Vulcan. Oh, your opponent doesn't really have a lot of. I guess melty guns don't work unless you take Vulcan. But you know, does your opponent have a lot of flamethrowers? Well, then you might want to play salamanders. Do they not? Well, maybe you want to infiltrate your entire army and you take, or scout your entire army and you take Raven Guard. It's just a really easy thing to do, and I don't approve of that. I guess. I mean, who am I? But this is just my 2 cents. An interesting take I have on that, and I was just telling the story the other day to a friend. I was at a pretty big tournament, and there was a guy there playing Tyranids. And you could tell that he was kind of part of a community that did this thing, because he had his army down on the table, and his opponent said, hey, on your list it says you have toxin sacs on that unit, and that unit has toxin sacs and adrenal glands. And he's like, yes, they do. He's like, well, they're not on the model. The guy goes, well, they don't have to be on the model. The guy across the table goes, like, why not? It's a thing that comes in the box. It's a thing that you equipped on the model that has a physical representation. There's no... I could understand if they were giving, you know, weird... back in the day when they had, like, extended carapace or something. What is that? Nobody knows. Should you maybe represent on the model? Probably. Do you have to? No, because it doesn't exist. We don't know what it's supposed to look like. We don't know if it even looks like something. So we don't know. And the guy brought a judge over, and the Tyranid player was like, hey, well, I shouldn't have to because this and the other thing. And the guy looks at the Space Marine player across from him, and he says, that model has a plasma gun. And he points to a guy with a bolter. And the guy goes... kind of nothing like knowing where the guy's coming from, and he says, even though he has a bolter, would he have a plasma gun if I said he has a plasma gun? And the guy goes, well, no, it has to be represented on the model. And the judge just looked at him, and I feel like that is something that's lost on a lot of gamers nowadays. And this is coming from a very competitive player. I really like competition. I mean, I want to have fun, but regardless of whether or not I win or lose, I always want to be preparing for another tournament. I want to put the finishing touches on my army, but I also want it to be fun to play against, and I want to have fun playing it. So trying to find that balance. This is coming from a person like me. I think people are too focused on winning. People are too focused on taking what's better for them on the tiny little proxies, and that escalating from, well, that guy with a flamethrower actually has a melting on this game. And then doing that so often that you play a Tyranid player and the guy has nothing glued to his models and doesn't even understand why that's wrong until a judge has to come over and tell him why he's wrong. And when you look at things like these new chapter tactics, which is my main point, that's what I'm afraid of when somebody talks about Iron Hands. And a friend of mine and me were both considering playing Iron Hands, even though we don't have Iron Hands armies. But we were saying to ourselves, like, well, when we decide which chapter we're going to play, we are just going to play that chapter and nothing else. Now it's unique because I'm playing Minotaurs and he's playing, I forgot their name, Red Scorpions. And his idea was to have all the apothecaries in every unit represent the feel no pain that they'd be getting, which I think is a great idea, because the normal chapter tactics for Red Scorpions are kind of bad. I mean, they get a 5-up feel no pain instead of a 6-up, but they only get it on tactical squads, and that's because they're replacing their sergeant for an apothecary. So he can still die, and they can still lose that. They're -1 leadership because they don't have a sergeant, and they have no access to cool weapons on the apothecary. So those are all huge downsides on just a few tactical units, and he still needs to take care of Calm. Now, my chapter tactics don't represent that necessarily, but a lot of my models have like cool Spartan shields on them because it's theme. I like theme. My army's themed towards what they're supposed to be, and I was thinking I could do the same thing. But both of us simultaneously agreed, well, maybe we should wait for our new chapter rules because we want to have a little bit of integrity with our armies. Now, obviously, from the competitive side of me is like, well, maybe I should start a detachment of Ultramarines in case I want to take Daguerreus or something of the sort. But that is a completely different issue. That's taking two separate armies, one as an ally, whereas normally I take Blood Angels as an ally, and they're painted differently from the rest of the guys in my army. And I guess if I were to touch on this with one phrase, it would be chapter integrity. If you want to play Ultramarines, then play Ultramarines. Don't say you want to play Ultramarines and then 5 seconds later decide, you know what, but using bikes would really be cool, so all these blue guys are White Scars, and I'm going to make Khan look alike. Because that is a very old, I shouldn't say very old, just the last Space Marine Codex touched on that a lot, and I think to focus too much on that is old school at this point, even though the book's only been out a week. The new Space Marine Codex has only been out a week. So, yeah, it's just my 2 cents. Hopefully give it something to think about, about just choosing a chapter, stick with it, Don't be that guy who has a Carnifex with nothing on it and says he has whatever he wants on it. Don't be that guy who has an unpainted Chaos Space Marine squad and says they have whatever they want on it. What else? Cryptex, Orc Knobs. All the time I see that stuff. Oh, they have a boss pole because there's a banner. Is that a WOG banner? Is that a boss pole? What's happening? Well, it's a boss pole. Okay, whatever. And you don't understand because they do whatever they want because they just want that tiny little advantage. I think that everyone should just choose something. Stick with it. Stop being all over the board. Dedicate yourself. Apply yourself. Make a cool, fluffy army that'll work well and be fun for you to play. And stop trying to play whatever is better than the guy across the table from you just because you have the added advantage of not giving a fuck. And most people won't say anything about it. And I think you're going to see that a lot more with Space Marines now because of the essential free point cost of it all. Somebody can just play the same army over and over again and every time play a new army by just taking a librarian and a chaplain or a librarian and a chapter master and just choosing, every time they play what's better for them. And if they try to tell you that, just, trying to do it for fun, there's maybe like 2 people in the world I would trust to actually say that instead of just a person I would look at and be like, sure, buddy. And go ahead, beat me up, kill me on the tabletop. It doesn't matter because I just think that it doesn't matter if you win or lose as long as you're having fun and being a good sport. And tailoring your list, which I'll get to some other time, and proxying whatever you want isn't good sportsmanship. Well, thanks anyway, guys, for listening. That's just my 2 cents, like I was saying. So hopefully you've gleaned some information from this. This is Faith My Shield. Ave.